How do people in Africa see their relationship with China? Is it a colonial one of forced economic dependence and debt-trap diplomacy, as U.S. media and politicians would have you believe? We'll discuss this and more on this week's China Report. Welcome to the China Report, made in collaboration with Pivot to Peace. Every week, we'll be helping you sort through the propaganda with an independent view of the country we're taught to hate, but know so little about. I'm your host, Amanda Yee. These are this week's headlines. President Xi Jinping made a surprise visit to Lhasa, Tibet on Wednesday, appearing before 20,000 people to mark 60 years since the establishment of the autonomous region. During the visit, Xi outlined the party's vision for Tibet and highlighted what it views as the region's four major tasks: ensuring stability, facilitating development, protecting the environment, and strengthening borders, according to Chinese state media. Xi noted that Tibet's economic and social development had achieved remarkable progress, leading to profound changes in the region. At the same time, he noted the need to promote two-way exchanges in economy, culture, and personnel between Tibet and other parts of China, and to guide Tibetan Buddhism in adapting itself to socialist society. Xi also called on the region to promote ecological conservation, expand green development, and pursue economic growth. China held its dress rehearsal last Sunday for its upcoming 80th anniversary celebration of what it officially calls the victory of the Chinese people against Japanese aggression, or the end of World War II. The official parade will take place on September 3rd and pass through Tiananmen Square. There are varying estimates of those killed by Japan's invasion and occupation of China, which lasted from 1931 to 1945, but some figures estimate around 20 million killed. The Nanjing Massacre of 1937 was one of the largest and most brutal, claiming the lives of over 300,000 Chinese people. The victory against the Japanese invasion meant the end of what the Chinese call the Century of Humiliation, which began with the British attacks in the First Opium War in 1839 and ended with the revolution led by Mao Zedong and the Communist Party of China in 1949. The celebration will also allow China to showcase a series of new generation weapons, including the debut of hypersonic weapons, anti-aircraft and anti-missile defense systems, and strategic missiles, which will demonstrate China's strategic deterrence capability. The development of China's defense infrastructure is seen within the country as a guarantee of Chinese sovereignty. China's military budget represents 1.6% of the country's GDP, well below the 6% of the United States, according to a survey by the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. China has hit back at the U.S. for discrimination against Chinese students at the border. In a press conference on Friday, Mao Ning, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, criticized the Trump administration for detaining students for over 70 hours when traveling to the U.S. and questioning them over topics unrelated to their visit. Mao stated at the press conference that these discriminatory practices seriously infringed upon the legitimate and legal rights and interests of Chinese citizens, severely obstructed normal personnel exchanges between the two countries, and seriously undermined the atmosphere for people-to-people and cultural exchanges. She continued, "Recently, the U.S. has frequently engaged in discriminatory, politically motivated, and selective law enforcement against Chinese students traveling to the U.S., These students are subjected to unfair treatment, including being taken into small dark rooms for repeated and prolonged interrogations." Mao then called upon Washington to thoroughly investigate and correct the mistakes. China plans to add 660,000 affordable nursery care centers by the end of this year as part of their efforts to ease the childcare burden on families. According to the guidelines the National Health Commission and 6 other government departments released in July, nursery care costs shouldered by families will be effectively lowered and the public's demand for affordable childcare services will be largely met. Expanding accessible and affordable nursery care services is seen as a critical measure to alleviate family financial burdens and encourage childbirth to address China's persistently declining birth rates in recent years. Under the latest guideline, the nation's nursery care system should comprise comprehensive service centers and a variety of childcare service providers such as regular nursery care units, home-based or community facilities, kindergartens offering childcare services, as well as facilities funded and managed by employers. Comprehensive nursery care service centers will not only provide care slots, but also offer caregiver training, family child rearing guidance, innovative childcare product development, and oversight on industry safety. Also under the guideline, medical institutions are required to offer infant health management and traditional Chinese medicine services regularly to nearby childcare institutions. They're also expected to organize health lectures and consultations on topics such as scientific parenting, growth and development, and the prevention and treatment of common infant and toddler illnesses. The guideline aims to establish China's affordable nursery care system by the year 2030. The U.S. media likes to frame the relationship between China and Africa as a colonial one. China, meanwhile, characterizes it as one of friendship and solidarity. But how do people in Africa see Africa-China relations? To discuss this, we are so honored to have on Dr. Fred Emembe. He is an international award-winning journalist, as well as the president of the Socialist Party of Zambia. Fred, welcome to the China Report.
You.
Well, we're so pleased to have you on. I think I want to get started with a piece of fairly recent news, which is that China recently announced the imposition of zero tariffs for all 53 African countries that have diplomatic ties with China. And in addition to this, China is Africa's biggest trading partner. They've built a lot of infrastructure across the continent through its Belt and Road Initiative. I'm just wondering, how people in Africa, how people in your country of Zambia, how do they see China? Because here in the U.S., China is extremely vilified. And the way that we characterize China's presence in Africa is often described as imperialist or colonialist. But could you, give us a picture of how people in Zambia and Africa in general see this relationship with China?
Our relationship with China is not new. It has got a history. It's got roots. People see our relationship from past, present, and also future. China in the past helped us to liberate ourselves from colonialism. China helped so many of African countries in all sorts of ways to liberate themselves from the colonial yoke. And who were the colonizers? The colonizers were the countries of Europe. They were the colonizers. It was not China which was a colonizer. China was a liberator. That history has not faded from the memories of our people. China today is helping us, again, in all sorts of ways, to defend our sovereignty. Defending your sovereignty means you being able to engage in economic relationships with others that do not undermine your sovereignty. China is helping us to industrialize. The relationships we have with China are win-win relationships. But of course, China is developing. And any developing countries has challenges. China has got its own challenges. We have our challenges. And we acknowledge the challenges that we face. China has got a private sector. That private sector sometimes, not even just in Africa, but even in China, has to be reined in, has to be controlled. Sometimes our governments are not strong enough to control Chinese private capital. And bad things do happen. There's no country where there's only virtues and no vices. There are vices. But we cannot let the virtues be dominated by the minor vices that we have with China. Certain things have happened that may not be desirable, not even in China. But on a scale, this is nothing compared to what Western private capital has done to us. Western private capital turned us into commodities. We were bought by Western private capital as commodities, as slaves. We were humiliated, exploited for centuries. If we had win-win relationships with the Western world, we wouldn't be where we are today. If we were even getting 40% or 30% of what we produced for them, we wouldn't be where we are today in terms of poverty and underdevelopment. So the relationship we have with China, yes, like any other relationship, including social relationships, they have got ups and downs. But you have to focus on the main things of that relationship, the main issues of that relationship. China is like a locomotive to us. It's pulling us to develop. We are benefiting from a developing China. The prosperity of China is being shared with us. And this is not a theory, but it's a practical reality. Over the last 20, 30 years of engagement with China, there's infrastructure that Africa never had. Infrastructure which our colonizers never built with all the money they took from us. We cannot industrialize at the pace that we want, at the speed that we want, without meaningful cooperation with China. We need China, and China needs Africa. Africa needs China, China needs Africa. We are benefiting in a very big way. China has no colony anywhere in the world that we know of. We are dealing with China as free human beings. We are free to choose what we want to get from China and what we don't want to get from China. China does not force us to do what we don't want to do. China is not manipulating us. We are not in a position to be manipulated by China anyway. China has no desire to manipulate. And if China was to manipulate us, that relationship was not going to last much longer. It was going to have the same reaction that the colonial Western world had with us. From the very beginning of subjugating us, there was resistance. We resisted from the very beginning. And we continued to resist until China came to help us liberate ourselves. China is liberating us also today from neo-colonial bondage. That has tied us in poverty, that has tied us to underdevelopment. So the relationship we have with China is very different. And we have never had it this way in our history, modern history. There is no country that has dealt with Africa the way China is dealing with Africa in history. We can judge that. Fair-minded people can analyze that and see the difference. There was no Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885 for China to carve Africa into its possessions. We are free people cooperating with a free China. Yes, there's solidarity and also there's business. Solidarity has continued from the colonial struggles. Business is a new thing. We never had a business with China. Now we are in business with China. Both public and private institutions are coming to Africa. And Africa is also going to China. It's a two-way thing. And China knows it, that the future of China is in the global south, not in the global north. You can see the tariffs that they're imposing on China. You can see how they are panicking over the development of China, trying to draw China back. If China does not strengthen its markets in the south, in the global south, it will have challenges. But the leadership of China from 2013, 2014 saw that very clearly and started to push much more to the global south. And that has benefited us a lot. We have Bangladesh today pushing very highly. We have Indonesia also joining. We have India also pushing quite well. And with these global south countries doing well, growing at a fast rate, our chances of developing become much higher. We cannot be tied to the history that reduced us to slaves, both shackled slaves and unshackled slaves. This is how we see China.
There's a lot that you mentioned that I want to unpack further in this interview. But one thing that you stated was that, China has its own private sector. Sometimes it needs to be reined in. There's something in the U.S. media that I'd like for you to address. There's currently a global race for both critical and rare earth minerals. China's mining presence in Africa is concentrated in a few countries, including the DRC, Zimbabwe, Guinea, and your own country of Zambia. Zambia is particularly rich in copper, and we need copper for like green technologies, electronics, the defense industry. But there is a tendency for U.S. media to seize upon the examples of Chinese private capital mistreating mine workers in Zambia, for example, and using this as an example of Chinese colonialism in Africa. I've seen politicians do it. I've seen U.S. media do it. Can you address these accusations and how this may impact the U.S. depiction of China in Africa?
The business regulatory frameworks in Africa, in most African countries, is weaker. And the private sector everywhere drives for maximization of profits. And the shortcuts are done where weaker government controls exist. And we have had that from Chinese capital, private capital. We have also experienced the worst of it from Western private capital. If Western private capital had dealt with us the way Chinese private capital is dealing with us today, would have been far much more developed. But there's nothing that stops us as government, African governments, to stop the bad practices of Chinese foreign capital just as much as any other foreign capital. Private capital or even public capital being imported or being exported to us needs to work in accordance with our own programs, our own rules. We cannot blame this on China. China has never stopped any African country from taking measures against Chinese private capital's violations. What we have seen is the Western capital is highly protected by their governments. You touch them, you have touched a raw nerve. A country is invaded, a government is toppled. How many governments have been toppled for differing with the Western private capital? How many in history, in Latin America and in Africa? We can even say even in Asia. There's no government in Africa that has been toppled by the Chinese government because it differed with Chinese private capital. So these are our weaknesses, which we have to work on with the Chinese private capital and with the help of China where it's necessary. And we have to learn from the way China is treating its private capital. Look, there's no political class, business political class of billionaires, millionaires in China that threaten the governance system of the country. A good example of that is the way Jack Ma was treated, was handled, reined in with billions. Can Western countries do that? No. China is not controlled by billionaires or millionaires, although it has got a good number of them now, probably more than any other country.
There's also another common popular media narrative of Chinese debt trap diplomacy. In late 2020, Zambia defaulted on its international debt, making it the first African country to do so since the start of COVID. And ever since, it's been working with China and other countries as well to restructure the $6 billion in loans that it owes. I think a lot of China critics would point to this example and say, this is a typical example of China ensnaring countries in the global south into debt traps and creating economic dependency. So I guess I'm curious how you would respond to these accusations, and would you characterize this case as Chinese debt trap diplomacy?
The debt that we owe China or Chinese entities is far much lower than what we owe the Western entities. We owe much more to the Western entities than we owe China. If our debt was only with China, it would be much more safer. We are in trouble not because of what we owe China. We are in trouble because of what we owe Western entities. But the problem was the Western entities, like in the case of Zambia, wanted to secure their own liabilities and push everything to China. And they wanted to make China the burden bearer. China to secure their own private debts with Zambia. That's not the way things work. There's no Zambian asset that has been seized by China. We are not in any way being blackmailed by China. And also the money that we borrowed from China, you can see what it did. You can see the airports that are there. You can see the hospitals that are there. You can see the schools that are there. You can see the roads that are there. You can see the infrastructure that is backed by there, hydropower stations and so on. But what we owe the Western entities, you have difficulties. You need a very strong microscope to see where that money went. And the truth is the money went back to the lenders without working anything for us. So the issue really, our burden is not what we owe China. If all our debts, all our liabilities were with China, would be much more comfortable. We would have better deals to resolve those issues. So there's no debt trap. Debt trap about what? A trap is something that you don't see. We are seeing everything that we are walking our way into with China. We are not groping in the dark. We are walking in the light. And we cannot be ensnared when we are walking in the light with our eyes open. Those who have tied us to IMF World Bank conditions, austerity measures that have crippled our social services, that have pushed us backwards, are not with China. And we know that as long as we continue to borrow from the IMF, the World Bank, and other Western institutions, we will not resolve any of our problems. And we have been on that path for more than 60 years now. We know what it means. That's why today we are looking for a new bank, for a new development bank under the BRICS. Because we can't continue on this road to Calvary forever. We have been on this path to Calvary, trying to climb Calvary for a very long time. But whenever we are making some progress, we roll back again and again and again. It can't continue. We have to make a break to this. And that's what they don't want. It's not that they are worried about that we are getting trapped by debt by China. What they are worried about is that China is helping us to move away from their trap. They have trapped us for centuries. They don't want us to have our freedom. Not only political freedom, but economic freedom. They are worried about our relationship with China because it's beneficial to us. Since when did the same institutions care about our plight? Since when did they care about debt trap for Africa? How long have we been under their debt trap? Even the current debt we have is with them. They are the biggest lenders to us. They are the ones who are continuing to trap us into debt. If they were to write off their debt today and we just remain with Chinese debt, our problems would be over. But they want China to be the burden bearer of their debts, to guarantee the repayments of their debts. China should help us pay their debts instead of China helping us to pay what we owe China. and the Chinese people. So we are not fools to be blinded by that. That propaganda is too cheap. It's not working. They better find something else. What they don't want is China to progress. Our relationship with China is a win-win relationship. China develops by doing business with the South, with Africa. Africa benefits and will develop by doing business with China. Both business and solidarity engagement are necessary for us. And the West doesn't want that. They don't want it because it is not beneficial to them.
You mentioned this earlier, but Zambia and China, they have like a long history of solidarity and friendship. Zambia was the first country in Southern Africa to establish diplomatic relations with the PRC. This relationship was also symbolized by the TAZARA Railway. And actually, at last year's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit, Tanzania and Zambia signed a memorandum of understanding to upgrade the TAZARA Railway, with China pledging around $1 billion toward this. So this railway was completed in 1975, and China had lent hundreds of millions of dollars in interest-free loans and even sent workers to help build this railway. And this railway was designed to help copper-rich Zambia access overseas markets and gain economic independence from Rhodesia and apartheid South Africa. So to this day, it's still the biggest project that China has implemented in Africa. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on the TAZARA Railway, what it symbolizes in terms of friendship and solidarity between the two countries, both historically and today.
Building the TAZARA Rail was not a small feat for China. The China that built the TAZARA Rail is not the China of today, with advanced technology and immense resources. China did not have the money and the technical capacity to build that rail. But there was a commitment. They saw in it that it was not just an economic project, but it was also a liberating political project. Zhou Enlai, the premier of China at that time, put in a lot of effort and attention to this under Chairman Mao. This rail was completed with the loss of 7 Chinese nationals in Zambia. And they are buried here in Zambia. They were not repatriated back to China. They are here. Their graves are here. Their remains are here as a testimony of that solidarity. At that time, China did not have commercial interests in Zambia or in Tanzania. There was no trading with China or mining, Chinese companies mining here. There wasn't. That came much later. It's a recent thing. China built this rail for our own prosperity, for our own well-being. And it was not a new project. This project was given to the Americans, was given to the Europeans, to the UK. They rejected it as not viable. They rejected it. They did not want to engage in it. China came into it with huge sacrifices. China gave us what China did not even have in most of its territory at that time. They gave us a rail that most Chinese cities did not have. So we will never forget this rail. Of course, it needs upgrading. Time has passed. It's an old project. It needs to be modernized and so on. And it's good our governments and the Chinese people are cooperating to bring this rail project to a modern state. It's a project that should not die. It's a project that we should never forget. Not only because of its magnitude, but the solidarity that lies behind it. the human sacrifice that lies behind it. It was completed not in an easy way. It was a difficult project for China. But also, don't forget that the materials, including sleepers, concrete sleepers, came from China. They brought in literally everything, including cement, which we could have produced in Africa. They brought in everything. But also, it's a project that unifies us. It unifies our struggles, the African struggles and the Chinese struggles. And if we could do that at that time, what more can we do now with the capacity China has? And this is why we are saying China today for us is a locomotive pulling so many wagons on the African continent, Latin America, and Asia. Why should we oppose that? Why shouldn't we be part of that? Look at the Road and Belt Initiative. Who wouldn't want, being given the situation we are in, who wouldn't want to be part of that? Who wouldn't want to benefit from that? But also, ironically, the same people who are dissuading us from cooperating with China, they owe China billions and billions and billions of dollars. They are the most indebted to China. Look at what Europe owes China. Look at what the USA owes China. Can you compare that to what we owe China? Anyway, this bond is unshakable. We have no sensible alternative to Chinese cooperation. We have to perfect it. We have to work on it, improve it all the time, make it more efficient, more effective, more orderly. Abandoning it, never. It's either we struggle together with China or we perish alone, or we are defeated by imperialism alone.
I want to ask you a question about China's socialist process. In the U.S., especially among some people on the left, there are a lot of varying views of Chinese socialism, debates whether it's socialist at all, and there are also a lot of criticisms of China's concessions to capital. You know, how would you and your party, the Socialist Party of Zambia, respond to these criticisms of China and their relation to private capital? And how do you see socialism with Chinese characteristics?
There was a lot we didn't understand about the work of the Communist Party of China. And there was a lot we didn't know about Chinese socialism or socialism with Chinese characteristics. We were dominated and blinded by our loyalty to the Soviet Union, most of us on the left. We did not know what China was doing. For the Socialist Party, we have spent the last, maybe I would say 7, 8 years studying China and reorienting ourselves, learning anew some of the principles. And there's no doubt this is one of the most successful revolutions in human history. This is an irreversible socialist program, totally irreversible. And also, it's not something that just dropped all of a sudden in 1978. To understand the Chinese Revolution, you have to start from 1949. The triumph of the CPC in 1949. Then you have to understand also the changes that took place in 1978, 1979. Under Deng. You also have to understand the changes of 2013, 2014 under Jinping. These define China and show the continuity of this revolution. It's a glorious revolution, one of the most successful revolutions in human history. When you come to understand China, you fall in love with China. And you don't need to be a communist, you don't need to be a socialist to appreciate what China has achieved. And this achievement would have not been possible without pursuing socialism. And this is not me saying this, the Chinese leadership itself is saying so. This is a socialist project. Building socialism with Chinese characteristics. And the Chinese characteristics are anchored on a long process of civilization. Many years, many centuries, 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. It is not something that has just dropped from the skies. Fidel once said, Chinese are very intelligent people. I agree with him. What we have achieved is a product of high levels of human intelligence and extremely hard work. Whether one agrees or aspires to socialist principles or does not support socialism, China cannot be ignored. What they can't stand today is that China is surpassing all that we have seen before in human development, in human achievement. China today is leading in many fields of human endeavor, and they can't stand to be surpassed by China for political, ideological, and even racist reasons. We used to say all roads lead to Rome. Today we can say all roads lead to Beijing and Shanghai. This is an achievement that humanity has never seen. What has been achieved is phenomenal. Not even the USA revolution achieved that much. And also the way it has been achieved, without colonies, without humiliating other human beings on this planet, without enslaving other human beings on this planet, China has achieved what it has achieved. Let's give credit where it's due. This is for us communists, for us socialists, this is the best example of a socialist revolution. And the credit goes to the people of China and their leaders. And outstanding leadership of Jinping, Deng, and Mao.
I agree with all you said. I think, to respond to some of the critics that say, China makes too many concessions to private capital, I really like what you said in a previous interview about the difficulties of socialist reconstruction and how, socialism is not a particular stage in itself. It's a transitional period. Mm-hmm. And, when you are transitioning to socialism, you are going to have to make compromises with capital, in some way or another. And I guess, could you speak a little bit on that?
Well, socialism, including the socialism with Chinese characteristics, is a transition. It's a transitional society. You have to bring in the principles of the society that you want to build in the future. A transitional society has to make many compromises. It has to make compromises with the capital. And the compromises require a lot of intelligence. You have to have a clear understanding of things to make the best compromises. Even in medicines are a compromise. If you took 2 aspirins, they may cure your headache and so on. 2 tablets of painkillers can cure your headache. If you take 100, you die. From a medicine that can cure you, same chemical composition. So to know what doses to take of everything, to know how to deal with capital, at the same time building a socialist society is not an easy undertaking. That's why we appreciate and exalt the intelligence of the Chinese leadership and the Chinese people. They have been able to transition in the way they have done to what they intended to be advanced socialism by 2049. This is marvelous. This is something glorious. This is something admirable. We admire China. Of course, without trying to copy what they're doing, but it's a source of inspiration. And also, it's a locomotive that pulls us. We stand a better chance to develop with China. We stand a better chance to live better by cooperating with China. China presents us what no epoch in history has ever presented us in the modern world. A chance to break away from poverty, a chance to break away from underdevelopment with China all the way.
So you're running in the 2026 Zambian presidential elections. I'm just curious, what is the vision for the country? What is your vision for the country? What is the vision of the Socialist Party of Zambia for the country? And what does a Zambia with socialist characteristics look like?
Socialism is a process, a long historical process. And it takes different times in different countries because of differences in culture and differences in circumstances. But for us, the most important thing is to defend our sovereignty. A country that is colonized, a country that is dominated by others, cannot develop in the way China has developed. China has been able to develop because it's not dominated by any other country. China defended its sovereignty from 1949 when the revolution triumphed. That revolution was about sovereignty. And with the defense of sovereignty, other interests can be defended. And also you have to democratize. Democratization means increase the participation of the people in what is going on in their countries and in their lives. We need to broaden the participation. It can't be left to a small class of people to decide everything, to do everything. The participation of the Chinese people in running the affairs of their country, in running their lives, is very high. The visits I've had to China have taught me one thing. There's more democracy in China than in any other country in the world today. I say that with absolute conviction, and it's not flattery. There's more democracy in China than there's democracy in the USA or any Western country. The people and the protection of the people's rights is much higher there. A country of 1.4 billion human beings cannot be dominated by one person. It's not possible. No matter how strong that person is, it can only be dominated by democracy. China, in my view, is an example of a democratic country. There's so much participation. I've never seen so many research institutes in my life. There's a research institute for almost everything going on in China. It's a system that is based on merit. The quality of leadership of the Chinese people is much, much higher than any country in the world. Many of the leaders in the West, if they were in China, they would not get anywhere, even to the middle level leadership. the quality of leadership is much higher. And it's a highly informed leadership. And to me, that guarantees China's progress. China is unstoppable. They can make all sorts of provocations. China knows even how to navigate around provocations. They want wars with China to slow down its progress, to destroy what is being done. It won't happen. So for us, the most important thing is to broaden the participation, to improve the governance of our country, and to focus on the things that really matter to our people. We have to ensure that our people have got access to education, quality education, education that they can use to develop their country and themselves. Access to quality health services that are free and socialized. And also, we have to pay a lot of attention to food and nutrition, which means also paying a lot of attention to agriculture. And for people to live better, they have to earn a living. They have to find a job in the economy. So ensuring that our people have got quality jobs, decent jobs, is a priority. These are not easy things to deal with, but this is the main focus of our struggle. So right now, we are working to unify the political opposition in the country so that we broaden the participation of our people and also extend to involving other leaders of our people, because the political leadership is not the only leadership we have in the country. We have the traditional leadership. This is authentic leadership of our people. We have the religious leadership. This is authentic leadership of our people. We have the business group. They also have to participate. They have to be listened to, and they have to be engaged. We have the cooperatives. We have the trade unions and the professionals. All our people must participate, building together, deciding together, and defending what has been achieved together. This is the only guarantee for us, in addition to international cooperation with the Global South.
You ran for president in 2021. You're running again in 2026. In the time since, you've been arrested multiple times in the past few years, all related to your criticism of the Zambian government. What do you think it is about you and your party that they find so threatening? Are they afraid that the people will be moved to socialist ideas?
Well, wherever there's a revolutionary process, there's always a counter-revolutionary activities. You cannot have a revolution without counter-revolutionaries. That's what dialectics teaches us. But also, there's a saying that genuine goodness it is often threatening to those on the other side of the moral spectrum. We have a genuine program. We have an authentic leadership. We have an ideology, an outlook that brings us much closer to the people. The more closer you are to the people, the more reactionary forces come for you. That bond with the people is threatening to those who exploit the people, to those who humiliate the people, to those who undermine the progress of the people. We cannot do this alone as the Socialist Party. We have to do it with others. We have to do it with the people themselves. And the people usually participate through their leaders. There are various leaders of our people. We are engaging with them every day. We are finding ways to work together with them. So this is threatening. And if we achieve this, which we are likely to do in the coming year, if we can unite all our forces we are unstoppable. And they know it. This is not the 2021 elections we participated in. That was a rehearsal. This is the real struggle that we are in. And we are pushing for power. Not power for the sake of power, but power to carry out a revolution.
Well, Dr. Fred Mumembe, thank you so much for joining us on the China Report. It was such a pleasure and an honor to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, the 15th Genting World Lion Dance Championship was held on July 27th in Malaysia. The three-day tournament featured 40 competing teams from all over the world, but it was Singapore's Yiwei Athletic Association that took the top prize. Yiwei actually sent 2 teams to the competition, and it was this one you'll see in this video that took home the championship. The dance is based on Neza, the Chinese deity often portrayed as a child in modern interpretations, and upon which the hit film is based. As a reminder, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on the China Report.